Welcome to Lunch with Leaders, the podcast where we explore what it takes to lead, thrive, and create lasting impact. I'm Adaeze Iloeje-Udeogalanya, a TEDx speaker, leadership strategist, and the founder of African Women in STEM. Each episode features insightful conversations with innovators, trailblazers, and leaders from around the world who are transforming cultures, redefining leadership, and shaping the future of work. Together, we'll share the stories, strategies, and mindsets that will empower women in STEM to amplify their visibility, influence, and impact. So if you're ready to lead boldly, amplify your voice, and help influence what leadership looks like for women in STEM, hit follow, share this podcast, and join us every week for impactful conversations, powerful stories, and practical strategies. Our guest today is JP Dumas. He is a customer experience powerhouse with 25 years experience transforming contact centers into revenue-generating machines. He scaled multi-billion-dollar operations, slashed churn, and boosted loyalty. He's helped businesses turn from customer service experience into brand-defining moments. So, as the founder of CX and Growth Strategies, JP partners with organizations to optimize sales, retention, and employee engagement because happy teams create happy customers. As a thought leader and podcast guest, JP shares industry insights with the same passion he reserves for sneakers, drops, and USC football. We're going to talk about some of those things. So when he's not helping brands elevate their customer experience, you'll find him traveling, golfing, or tracking down a perfect pair of Jordans. Customer experience should drive revenue, not headaches, and let's make it happen. JP, I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. That's an awesome intro. As I'm listening, and I'm saying, who is that guy? Sounds like somebody I want to work.
We have so much going on. I wish we could get into everything. However, we are going to touch on certain things, which is a tip of the iceberg, but still going to be incredible for everybody that's listening today.
Awesome.
So let's get it. You built a reputation as a customer experience powerhouse. You had over 25 years experience doing this, transforming organizations. Everybody wants to be you right now. But I know that before all of this, you had a beginning and you have a story about how you grew into the leader that you are today. I would absolutely love for you to share that with us because sometimes we see the end product and we don't know how it all started.
Yeah, I would say it's similar to social media where we see everyone's greatest hits, but we don't see all the bombs and things that happen as we get there. So I'll tell you, for me, it started years ago. When I was in elementary school, they would give kids these catalogs and it would have a bunch of gifts in it. And it says, if you wanted to win this prize, you had to go sell something. Usually it was chocolate and you sell candy bars and all this fun stuff. I remember selling everything from candy bars to garden seeds. And what I mean by that is like seeds you could plant in your garden or plant vegetables and some sort of cosmetic jewelry. It was running the gambit. But the whole point was if you wanted to win something, then you had to put out the output. And so I quickly realized that I don't know if I had a passion for selling. It was probably just a passion for begging because I wanted that prize that bad. And you got to think about selling seeds. I grew up in LA. There's not a lot of places to plant seeds. Quite not. But I convinced people that, hey, you only need a little patch of grass and you can have some flowers and you can grow some vegetables because I really need this Walkman. So that tells you how long ago it was, a Sony Walkman for those of you. Anyway, that was a cool prize then. As I understood that, I started to get a passion for the ability to be successful with sales is really the transfer of enthusiasm. So the better you know your product and you're excited about it, you can get other people excited about it. The most important thing is, and they have to have a need for your product, but they also got to like you. Because if they don't like you, they're not buying anything. That started me on my leadership journey years and years ago. And then I've had a number of jobs in between. High school, I worked for Baskin Robbins, scooping ice cream, which there's a lot of lessons involved with that. And then I was a telemarketer, that person that interrupted dinners and said, I got something to sell. And if you didn't hang up, then you were somewhat interested. So I'll stop there before we get into the meat of it. But those are my origin stories about how I got started. I wouldn't say I was born to do this, but it was something I was curious about.
That's interesting because, again, I think having that prize that you win for selling things is one way to entice people. So even if it's not something you like to do, you get to do it, but then it worked out for you perfectly. And then you said you used to be a telemarketer?
I used to be a telemarketer. It was a funny story. I was in school and they announced over the loudspeaker that this company was looking for telemarketing reps. So there were 3 of us who went down to the company that day to interview. I said, part-time job, telemarketing, have no idea what it is, but they're giving us money, right? I'll figure it out. I go down there and I'm in a tie because Catholic school. So I'm in a tie and I show up and quickly realizes no one else is wearing a tie. Rule number 1, how you present yourself matters. When they're asking me about the job, I said, listen, I'll be a gopher if that's what it requires. They said, what do you mean? I'm like, go for this, go for that. I'm just here to work. So rule number 2, be enthusiastic, right? And so I was enthusiastic, said, I just want to work here. So fast forward, they said, okay, we'll contact you. Maybe 1 or 2 weeks later, I didn't get anything in the mail, didn't get anything on my answering machine. I said, oh, I guess I didn't get the job. But one day we're in class, my classmate said, hey, the company was wondering why you hadn't shown up for work yet. And I'm like, what are you saying? No one's contacted me. They said, yeah, they've been trying to get a hold of you. So that day I called them and said, hey, I'm ready to start working. And that was with the company that I eventually spent the next 17 and a half years with. Now, here's the moral of the story. Always follow up. No matter what, it was the funniest thing because that serendipitous moment of someone saying, hey, they were looking for you and me following up that day and saying, hey, don't miss that opportunity. So that's how I started and started off as the telemarketer. And yeah, the rest is history, as they say.
I love that you said follow up. If someone said they've been looking for you, I was be thinking, if I call them now, are they going to think I'm serious? Are they going to ask me, why didn't you come? And there are a lot of reasons why we can hold ourselves back, even when the opportunity presents itself. So I'm hoping that we learn from this to always just do the thing and let the other person, take the decision they want to take and we can go from there. This is a very interesting story. That you ended up spending 17 years of your career there.
It's interesting because it's like the stories we tell ourselves. I told myself I didn't get the job without really following up and saying, hey, what happened here? Maybe I wrote a number down. Maybe they read it wrong. It could have been so many different things. Sometimes things happen, like my classmates saying, hey, they've been looking for you. And me calling them that day, saying I'm ready to work. And more importantly, making a first impression that was memorable enough where when I called, they knew who I was and they said, get on down here. And from there, we were off to the races. And this was a company where I said it was just going to be a job to do at the time. But then, as I stated, I was in high school. Then I went to college and I started getting these promotions and they would work with me each step of the way in my educational journey. It was really that little thread where you never know which opportunity that quote unquote doesn't look like much in the beginning, but you turn it into what you need it to be by showing up and doing good work.
Okay, you're dropping gems. So you just said something which I think about all the time. This season, I went to a couple of conferences and you find a lot of people that come to these conferences to get jobs. Yeah. And they come to these conferences, they have expectations and the experience may not be what they expected and they assume that nothing came out of it. So when you said opportunities that don't seem like much to begin with can end up being so much more. I want you to talk a little bit about that because I feel like, especially, I understand that the market is crazy right now, but even beyond now in general, I think we have to be able to make the best of every opportunity, even when it doesn't seem like a big deal.
I heard something years ago, and it may have been Anthony Robbins or someone, but they made the point that these are disguised as work clothes. And so you don't always see what they are. You have to dig a little bit. And there's some variations about this where, you don't see the diamond right away. It's a lump of coal, and then it has to go through a process. I think that's what happens a lot with us. We say, okay, this is just a job. But when I thought about how big the company was, and within a year of working there, the company was acquired by a much larger company. And so now all of a sudden, there's this window of opportunity of jobs that are available. And then these other opportunities started to come. I remember I was probably 2 or 3 leaders in, because I had a series of leaders. I became an assistant, a lead, and they were going to hire a new manager or a supervisor, something like that. And I raised my hand and said, hey, I've been here a couple of years. I'm ready to do this job. I applied, but I didn't get the role. I remember that follow-up piece. I went to the manager and said, why didn't I get the role? They said, we're hiring a person that is really, really good. And when you meet her, you're going to want to run through walls for her. And I thought, first of all, in my limited time in the career, I never had a boss that I wanted to work for. They just happened to be there and I did the job. But the whole notion of someone you wanted to work for was intriguing. And they said, when you meet her, you'll know. And so they bring in this individual from the outsider. She had been recruited. I think she had gotten like her master's degree, and she had been recruited by, there was this foundation that looked for diverse talent to place them in these roles in telecommunications, which is the field I was in at the time. And as I talked to her, I said, don't see a lot of people that look like us in these roles. That was intriguing. She was female, had an MBA, and all this stuff. The background was very interesting to me. But when they said, hey, this is the type of person you want to work for, I remember her saying, you guys are doing a great job here. My job is to learn, understand the business, and get out of your way. And it was just so different for me. And that kind of helped me understand the importance of employee experience as part of the workplace. So it isn't just you show up and do a job, but you also need to create an environment where people could thrive. She really started to give me assignments and opportunities to kind of spread my wings. So going back to the original point about you never know what the situation might be. If you take these little opportunities, little nuggets, it can lead to something. I went from doing my job to one day representing the department in a cross-functional meeting. You got the GM there, and I'm here talking about the world of telemarketing sales and what we did. It's like the whole regional team there. And I'm like, this is amazing. Fast forward a couple of years later, she left the organization and they were doing a regional consolidation, which means I would have had to move offices. And at that point, I could go to graduate school. And I said, this has probably run its course. I don't know if I want to move. I've got other things going on, but it's been a great opportunity. I remember the general manager who was tapped to run this new regional office came to the office and said, I heard some things about what you guys are doing here. You and your assistants are doing a good job. I want to invite you to interview for a supervisor position in this new office. I said, I didn't know who she was at that time or her stature. It taught me a lesson that there are people watching your performance who can determine whether or not those next opportunities come along. My boss and others had been advocates for the type of work that I was doing, that it ended up on someone's desk with someone I never met before. Here's a door that I can open for you. It's all of those lessons that all come from these small micro moments, these small opportunities that you put your best foot forward, you show up, you have great attitude, and you deliver the results. And people have a funny way of finding you. That allowed me I think I was 23 at the time, about to turn 24, and I had my first leadership role. So there may be some people that may go further in their career to do that, but now I'm getting a legit leadership role in a corporate environment, and I'm not even old enough to rent a car yet. So for me, that was like, hey, by that point, I'm like, I already have like 5 years experience in a corporate environment. It's those sort of just happy moments that come along. And I think Steve Jobs said, it's only in hindsight we're able to connect the dots. But yeah, it was cool. So long answer, short question, but that's what you do with opportunity.
I love that. This is really good. That's why I like having these conversations, because I always get more than I bargain for.
Yeah.
And so basically your career was a lot around customer experience. And there's something you said about working with the other lady, giving you an idea of what it means to have a good employer experience. I'm one of those people that think customer service is all about calling to complain, but you have turned it into something much more, a revenue engine, because that's what companies really care about eventually. So what made you go from let's just fix the complaints that people bring to us to let's radically the outcomes for the businesses, the employees, and the customers as well?
I think there's a couple of pieces. The first was at the company I worked at, one of the perks at the time was that you would get the product for free. I was working for telco, I had cable television, what have you. And I would joke, I said, they're paying me to watch TV because that's one of the perks. But it was more than that. You were given the product for free so you could experience it as a customer. If you experience it as a customer, you would understand their likes or dislikes. And more importantly, you have a unique perspective on how to solve those problems, but more importantly, how to prevent those problems from happening. So it ends up giving you this unique view of how do we fix the business? When I think about from a customer operation, and I think about from a contact center perspective, those parts of the business do not generate the issues in the business. They are a reflection of the issues in the business. If you start to get these quote unquote issues coming your way, you can now start to inform the business that says, guess what? Our bills aren't very transparent. People don't know what they're paying for. Number two, our service may or may not be reliable. It goes out every time it rains. Number three, we have some folks who don't exactly like being here. And when they pick up the phone, they take it out on the customer. Like you start to get all these different pieces that inform the customer experience. And then more importantly, we're able to tell the business, here are the friction points that prevent people from giving us their money. Why we're here. We want it to be a frictionless experience. We want to deliver a product, but here's some things we have to get right. For me, full disclosure, my background and what I went to school for is in psychology. And psychology is essentially the study and prediction of human behavior. I can predict what the response would be from a customer who has a bad experience. We study this, right? We understand triggers, patterns, all of these different pieces. Layering that with employee experience, I noticed that when the phones are ringing and people are buying, people tend to be happier. But I also noticed that when customers are complaining, the morale in the department is lower. You start to get these real simple things that say, if A, then B equals C. And so that becomes the focus of how do we leverage that to drive more business, get customers to stay. And I started to, later in my career, start to draw this line that says there's like this correlation between the happier our employees are, the better the experience is for a customer and the more they spend. And so that's how these things become tethered to one another.
Oh my goodness, that is so great. And I know some companies do them, but then I also realize some don't. And to your point, when you have that and use it and have those experiences, you can immediately bring it to, into the company and start trying to find the solutions versus waiting until the calls come in from other users who may not be very happy about the experience.
But I think particularly in customer experience and CX, things are often lost in translation, especially as your business grows. You have departments and organizations become very siloed. Sales may not talk to marketing, may not talk to customer support, may not talk to product, may not talk to field, may not talk to engineering. So all of a sudden, everyone's working on a different part of the problem and not exchanging notes. It becomes important to harmonize that entire customer journey to say, okay, what has to happen between the time we market to someone actually gets our product? What are all the different handoffs that happen? What are all the different inflection points where things can go wrong? Then you start to realize it can become very complex. Think about when these departments don't talk to each other. It's like making a burger. Person cooks it. This person puts the lettuce on it. This person puts pickles. This person has to put it in the bag. And this person has to make sure that the utensils in the bag. We've all been through at a drive-through. Different parts of this process, from the person not hearing the order correctly, creates this downstream ripple effect of you drive off, now you're missing your fries or you have no ketchup and this and that. And it seems like a very simple thing to do. But if you think about how these processes and systems or workflows work, if people aren't talking to each other or there aren't checks and balances, then the customer experience becomes a crapshoot.
And that's true. The customer doesn't see the silos and they don't care about the silos.
They don't care.
They see one company. This company did X to me. This company did not do Y for me.
That's exactly it. And that's oftentimes when you hear, even internally, the languages align. I can remember having negative experience. I went to a big box retailer. I was moving, trying to purchase a refrigerator. I had gotten all the touch points in. The refrigerator is going to be delivered this day. And that day, the moving day comes, I have no refrigerator. Well, there's not a lot you can do when you don't have a refrigerator. You got food, you have all these items. The first person I contacted says, would you like us to refund your money? So there's a disconnect right away where you're not understanding that the goal is to ensure that the customer gets the product that they ordered. The goal is not to give the customer their money back or to get them off the phone as quickly as possible so that you can go into your day. There was a misalignment around priorities. The next person I talked to wanted to give me a credit, but everyone was missing the broader picture of how quickly can we get this customer their refrigerator. Right? Long and short of it, social media, I had to escalate because I'm in that business. Got an executive, apologized profusely, wanted to do all sorts of things, wanted to hang the sun, the moon, the stars. And I said, herein lies your problem. You're an executive and you know exactly what to do at this point. But look at the level of effort I've had to get to this point. No one in your chain of command below had the initiative, desire, or playbook to handle this situation. So it had to go all the way to you. That's a failure in your organization. And that's not dissimilar what happens in a lot of companies. It's not that people aren't well-intended. I'm pretty sure that they wanted to get me the refrigerator. But as I spoke to each department, it became a function of, I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they did this, as opposed to saying, we did not do what's necessary and we will get it corrected for you. So much so that I ended up connecting with the CEO on LinkedIn, and I'm still connect with he's a former CEO now, but to this day, but it was just one of those studies, and I ended up getting basically a free refrigerator out of it. But I've told this story a number of times. We need to be on the same page to understand our mission as an organization, regardless of which part of the organization we reside in. The focus should be on the delivery of the outcomes to that customer so that we as a company can do one of three things: grow our customer base, increase our revenue, and do it in a profitable manner. I don't care where you're sitting or what you do. Your business typically comes down to those three areas.
That is true. And that's lead us to the fact that people or companies don't lose customers because of, for example, your particular instance where you wanted a refrigerator to get your new home before you got there. They lose customers because there's so many other small things that were not addressed in the system or the way the system works. So in this particular situation, you said you connected with the CEO, but I'd like to know how you help companies mend this system that is broken, how you help them rebuild it, and how you help them give their customers a better experience.
I think there's a couple of things that I focus on both personally and professionally. The first piece is understanding where, I'll use an automobile example. You got to understand where the oil is leaking in the driveway. You have to understand where the break points are in organization, because the reason why I'm so passionate about contact centers is because they often become the dumping grounds or a reflection of the experience, as I mentioned earlier. And so I start there with helping companies work their way back, work backwards. They said, our contact centers can do better, our agents can do better, we can have better experiences with the customer. The very first question is, why did the customer contact your contact center? What happened? Were they just sitting on the sofa and they needed a human to talk to? You know, you say it facetiously, but what was the genesis of the interaction? Because there was a point where they engaged, they wanted to use your services, they used their services and it worked. One of the things that's most important is we want to be easy to do business with and make things simple. Advising companies and leaders in these organizations says, let's take a look at what the perfect process looks like. And so you map that out. That's part of your assessment. The assessment is really, You look at how things exist in their natural state, and then identify opportunities. But then you start to work back to what would an ideal state look like, and using all sorts of things, either from customer survey, employee feedback, or any of those mechanisms to start to understand, okay, this is what happens when things are perfect, but when things are less than perfect and we have these tickets and escalations, what caused that? We know things are never going to be perfect, and customers will give you grace. Yeah. If things break, no one's expecting a perfect experience. What they're expecting is for things to work consistently most of the time. But when they do not, there's a mitigation or recovery process to get things back on track quickly. I'll give you an example from my days in travel. We engineered a system where a customer can research and book their entire travel experience in the digital space and never speak with a human. And that works great, right? If you provided that you have the information they're looking for, the right amenities, the right digital tools, and the right redundancies and confirmations, meaning they'll get a confirmation through email or SMS, or you provide instructions as to what happens next, right? And that's a perfect world. But as we see with this time of year, you tend to get weather impacts. That's a disruption to the system. It happens frequently enough where you can't be surprised by it. You have to plan for those situations. So then you have this digital experience that now offloads to a human where, hey, you're going to miss your connecting flight. Hey, the hotel was oversold. Here's a 800 number or hotline or a click to call or chat where you can immediately engage with a human. We're going to take it out of the bot world and put you directly with a human. We recognize this is an emotionally charged situation. You may be in the airport. You may be flustered. You may be frustrated. You might be tired. You might be hungry. And now the human has this information to say, I understand your flight was delayed. We have rebooked you on the next available in the window seat, or we have secured vouchers for you at this hotel, and we've rebooked you so that there's minimal disruption. You have to plan for the best experience, but you also have to plan for the worst case scenario and provide, those sort of avenues where people know what's happening and, more importantly, what happens next and what they need to do. And that reduces the temperature, that reduces the customer anxiety. More importantly, it lets them know that you own it, and that builds trust. And so you're either I booked with your company and now I'm sleeping in the airport in Cleveland, or I've been rebooked and I had a refreshing night at the local Holiday Inn, and I get it, it's weather, you can't do anything about it, but you got me on track and I'm going to be home in time for whatever I need to do. So that's a long answer to how do you help companies understand how to create that experience? You start with where the experience has already gone south because you already have that data. And more importantly, we start to build out this ideal state of what we need to do next. I think the last piece I'll add to this is customer experience looks different for each department. They have to have some sort of customer experience metric that aligns with the mission and goal of that department. For example, for product, do we have the features that customers care about that make us competitive? Sales, are we delivering a consistent message around our product, not overselling and under-delivering? Marketing, are we targeting the right individuals? Customer experience or customer support or customer excellence, whatever you call it. Do you have a feedback mechanism in the organization that tells the company the good, the bad, and the ugly of what customers are saying so that we can continue to iterate as we go through this process? Everyone has to have a hand in the business and a way to measure the impact to the customer based on their individual metrics, not some siloed metric.
Yeah, this is really good. How can leaders be proactive? Because sometimes we start solving these problems when things have gone south. But how can leaders be proactive? You can solve everything, but at least make sure that you minimize the extreme cases, for example.
Yeah, you're right, because leaders will respond to that social media message when that customer is just very upset. I think there's a couple of things because we've got a ton of data and dashboards today. I think the most basic thing we need to do is if you're not directly servicing a customer, you're probably interacting with someone who is, get the feedback from that person. in those groups. So we really understand what's happening in the business, encourage cross-functional engagement groups so that if you're, and I keep going back to customer experience. If you're a customer experience, you've got to be sitting in the product meetings and understanding what are we building? Are they the right things that people care about? If I'm in the marketing department, I probably want to understand what people are responding to from a sales perspective. You've got to have that cross-pollination in each of these groups, and you've got to be curious about your business. I think one of the most important things of walking into any organization is understanding, if you're a new hire, how does your company make money? What is their organizing principle? And then how do you add value in that space? And you have to be curious. And if you don't understand that, you miss the bigger picture of why the company exists.
That's key. Knowing how the company makes money. For people that are technical, I'm an engineer and I work in the technical space for my entire career. Sometimes we don't focus on how does a company make money. We're very excited about what we're building.
Yeah, they're building these things, and I don't mean to be derisive, but sometimes we build these things that are science projects. No one asked for that, and the customer doesn't value it. But someone said, really cool to have. Let me ask you this. How do we measure if this is a success? Is it measured in increased customer sales? And what is it? Well, it's in some sort of satisfaction or the number of tickets we closed this week. But beyond that, what is that a measure of? They all need to be driving towards the functional aspects of the business. And I think about it in those terms because I've worked for publicly held companies. Every quarter, when you get in front of your investors, the only thing they care about is the business growing and are we making money? And so I don't find that it's that dissimilar from a number of, different organizations. Even if you're private, even if you're a startup, your investors, the board, they want to know what's the growth trajectory, and then what drives the growth, what drives the business, what are we doing here? And so I think it becomes important. Where we tend to get into trouble is when we don't necessarily have that knowledge of operations, we end up in these silos just doing stuff.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to go back a little bit because I remember you talked about building a product where you wanted the customer to be able to book the travel experience with no human involved, except when there's a problem. That kind of brings me to where we are today, which is we're dealing with AI. We're in the age of AI, and it seems like what everybody's saying is that AI is here to replace humans, to make humans redundant. But we've seen also from what you said that it has to also be some level of customer experience where you can interact with somebody that actually understands you. So how can customer experience really be competitive enough in this age and be still relevant?
Yeah.
How can AI elevate customer experience and kind of use AI to make things better without just chop everything off and let AI do the work?
Yeah, because it's kind of like someone says, well, QuickBooks and Excel sheets going to replace accountants. Well, not really. You need the expertise. I think it's better to think about AI as working alongside humans as and more of an integration. It is a tool, right? Like it's not a separate AI strategy. AI is meant to help you accelerate the strategic imperatives of your business. Now, are there cost savings? Absolutely. Especially there's some things that are somewhat redundant that we don't need to be involved with. And that's a great cost savings for the business. But I think of it as use cases that we have forgotten about. Like we think about the automobile industry. We've had robotics for years, but there's still humans on that line that help organize and humans actually climb in the car and fix certain things on that assembly line of things that humans can do. I also think about things like the military, where we have drones and we have a lot of different technologies, but we still have boots on the ground. So these become tools that work alongside of us. Now, perfect example, I probably want to have a robot doing the bomb defusement where I probably had a human doing that before. There's a lot of, it de-risks those sort of operations. And I probably want a human who has their finger on that switch to determine if there's a next action that needs to happen, and not necessarily an algorithm that determines that. So I think it's about how do you empower humans to work smarter and work better, take away some of that busy work. When you have these huge warehouse jobs, yes, you're probably going to need some robotics to move these things around, but it's humans who tell you where these things can go as well.
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about that because, to your point, like we've had robotic the automotive industry for a very long time, and yet we still have humans. What typically happens now, especially with AI and the race, is that we see a lot of chopping, like let's just eliminate everything. They will start walking back. But is there a way? Because ultimately, most of the companies or leaders that make these decisions are making it from a financial perspective. We want to be able to save money, make money. But can you talk a little bit about that and tell us how we
Yeah,
can do that in a way that's better?
I'm going to do a little myth busting around that because they say funny, but I think there's a couple of levels that you want to think about it. There is the cost perspective that says, let's extract some of the costs out of this. And I'll use contact center as an example. There are main mundane stuff that you can do from a digital perspective or self-service. Absolutely. You can get rid of that. But you think about that person who has that more complex situation, or you think about healthcare and things like that, where you need a human to walk you through that, then that becomes an important part of that discussion. But your first level is taking costs out of the business so you can be run more efficiently. But your next levels are growth and really being optimized. And again, the investments come from the growth and optimization. Like no one's putting in AI for a company just to reduce their costs. You're putting in AI because it's going to show you how you can accelerate growth. We're not going to spend billions of dollars to simply say, oh, well, we got rid of the people and we're back to where we were before, but we're more efficient. That's not the way business operates. It operates on we are 4, 5, 10x better than the human output that we were getting before. And we're not there yet. And I think the other piece that's important is that there are some companies that overhired during the pandemic. One of your most expensive costs in any organization is your labor costs. If your revenue per employee is down because you've overhired, you can't simultaneously invest in acquiring these data centers and this AI infrastructure that's going to allow you to do things in the future. And we know that future growth, that money needs to be paid for today. They're not going to take an IOU. So that's one way that you get your books right. And so I think that's part of it. Philosophically, it's less about the Terminator and it's more about Iron Man. It's about how you take that human who now has the information, who's received this proactive information because of AI to see around the corner and now can execute and ideate differently in their business because they've taken this mountain of data and now they're being given insight. It's humans who have that creativity to think about what hasn't been thought about before to make the business better. So less about having 100 people sifting through data to give me the insight as to why a customer is not buying, but it's more about AI tells me not only why people aren't buying, but what they're most interested in. And as a human, now we put that together and I have an awesome campaign or a new iteration that I can execute and bring to market a lot faster for lower costs. That's the synergy between human creativity and the tools of AI. Because if you don't have that human with the correct strategy, all AI is going to do is accelerate and scale bad workflows, bad ideas, and you'll go out of business a lot faster. So it's really about how they play well together. And there are a number of companies who are using these use cases to understand how to grow their business or to retain customers in that particular area. This isn't science fiction. There are people who are doing it, but it's really about this intersection of humans and data. And I'll leave you with this. I think one of the biggest pieces, when I think about specific use cases, is it's helping you aggregate your data and figuring out how clean it is. A lot of what we're seeing with AI right now is large language models, which are predicated on having a consistent view or some sort of accuracy in your data. We've not proven that a lot of these organizations actually have accurate data. So that just becomes the foundation to be able to do many of the things that we're looking to do.
So two things I got out of it. I love what you said about it's less about being the Terminator, but more about being Iron Man. It kind of goes back to what we've been hearing, which is it's not like AI will replace your job, but people who know how to use AI, well, it's imperative that we all get better, rid of redundant inefficiencies, and then implement AI to be even more creative. It gives us room and the space to do that.
I think you get your answers quicker, which is why you talk about these entry-level jobs. where AI can create the deck. It can create the storyboard. So maybe that job goes away, but I can redeploy that person who spent 3 or 4 years at the business school to think creatively in another area in the business. So it's less about the doing per se. It's more about the thinking. It's more about the why. It's thinking about, we've never tried that before, because so much of what you're seeing is just predicting the next thing based on patterns that have happened before. But humans think about things that aren't even patterns. We create. So now you can start to bounce these ideas off that would take hours and days and now can be done in minutes. What does that lead to? I was speaking to a friend of mine who is a copywriter, does resume writing, and all this other stuff. And I said, well, isn't AI going to put you out of business? I said, well, if you're a crappy writer, AI is not going to make you better. So you can just look at the slop that's out there. You can look at, the voice is stilted. It sounds like everyone else. It's like what I put into things based on my experience or what I've written and seen, I can use AI to elevate that. It really gave me an opportunity to think about it. It's going to make you better if you have the foundational knowledge of what better looks like.
I love that. I absolutely love that. We've already talked about your career within organizations, but I know that you're also an entrepreneur as well. How has your work or the way you lead and work changed being on the other side? What have you learned?
I think there's a couple of things. The first thing I'd say is it can be scary as heck when you've stepped out of this corporate umbrella, right? Because you're now all of the departments that you've done before. But I think there's also the freedom and flexibility to determine how you want to work. We often hear so much about these portfolio careers, and we also see that this year alone, we've lost 1 million jobs. And so the real things that you really have is, what you're able to produce, your brand, and you can still solve problems. You just do them in a different way. I often I've shared this with people. I said, you manage your career like a professional athlete, meaning that it could be over at any time. But because you have those skills, you can now apply them in a different way. And that's what led me to CX and growth strategies. I'm also a partner with CX on the Rocks, where we talk about helping companies improve their sales performance, reduce churn, and elevate their employee experiences. That work doesn't go away. There's more of it because we get so task focused on what we need to do in our individual worlds that we don't see the bigger picture of what's happening in their business. I think the last thing is, it's just giving me a voice to not just talk about these things, but they're informed by experiences. They're informed by actually doing the work. I didn't show up here fresh out of college with a theory and said, hey, this is how I think you need to run your business. It's almost 3 decades in those trenches, being responsible for a $500 million P&L, being responsible for thousands of people, signing my name to the business when things have not worked or when they work well, developing dozens of leaders over the years. I mean, and then applying. And so now you take all that experience and apply a few technical tools to start to have this digital sounding board or a virtual assistant that says, you know what, I'm thinking about this. Is this the right way to go about it? Challenge my thinking. And it makes you much more productive, provides much more value in the marketplace.
So let's talk about this very interesting part of you, which is being a sneaker enthusiast. I want to know, because I just started wearing sneakers recently. I only want to if I have to go to sports. But tell us about why and about your collection. Yeah, and how that kind of makes you innocent.
I think we all have a story of Michael Jordan and watching the sneakers and whatnot. But I think what gets lost in translation is Michael Jordan's story of Nike and him signing and creating the Air Jordan is such a different experience, because his shoes, quite honestly, were twice as much as everyone else's shoes. And so for many of us, that just wasn't going to happen. I'm telling you, I'm going door to door to sell this other stuff. Their shoes were not on the list, but I always liked the fashion. More importantly, liked what they represented in the culture, how Nike connected with that, how they understood the whole customer experience and whatnot. So there are a number of shoes I wore throughout the years, either through fashion, culture, and whatnot. You fast forward, you get a little bit older, you can now actually afford some of these shoes, but there also was a step change in the workplace. When I was coming up in my career in sales, everybody had to wear a coat and tie and hard bottom shoes. And that was the ethos for a long time, probably up until the pandemic. A lot of places I've engaged with, that was pretty much the work uniform. And as that started to evolve and Casual Friday became that opportunity for you to express yourself differently, you can show up a little differently. That's how the shoe situation started. But I also recognize that when you wear the shoes, they become a conversation starter. And this is why Air Jordan was such a big deal. Most shoes were black or white, and maybe radically, someone may have had a blue or something like that, but you didn't have a lot of colors. Nike and these guys started experimenting with a lot of colors, and a lot of companies started doing this. And so now you can have blues and reds and greens and neons, change your laces. That part goes back to the hip hop culture, which I am a hip hop head from day one. For me, it's the culture reflecting my background in that subculture. It's a nod to others in the organization. When I have those shoes and I'm walking through the corporation, they said, I see you and I feel seen. So I can have a signifier without saying it. And so it evolved as I started to go to these conferences, and we say, well, you want to give somebody something memorable. They're like, oh, you're the guy who had on those purple shoes and who made a good point about CX. And so you start to pair that with different things. And then again, we've been talking about these things for years. Every time there's a new drop or a new edition that comes out or they retro something, it's just a conversation. It's like saying, who's your favorite musical group? Someone says, what's your favorite model that you like to wear? And that sparks a debate. I see it as more than just foam and rubber and glue. It's about a subculture, an expression of who you are. You reach a certain point where you can actually afford them.
Yeah, so being from LA, did it influence this for you?
Oh, absolutely. LA is different from a lot of areas because it's the entertainment capital of the world. It's not unusual for me to have seen athletes, entertainers, business leaders, movie stars growing up. Shout out to the Lakers. I went to a lot of Laker games. You also have the hip hop culture in LA. So a lot of rappers have come out of LA, Ice-T and Ice Cube and NWA, Dr. Dre, all of those guys, and they are all steeped in hip hop culture. So it's everything from what they say to how they dress. So Nike Cortez, which is very much a West Coast shoe. The Converse Chuck Taylor All-Star, which everyone has a pair of those canvas shoes, like 100 years or something like that. That is very much a West Coast thing. And of course, we also have the gang culture, which had a certain style of dress. You had the do's and don'ts, which is part of the reason why in a lot of areas we don't wear certain colors, because that, when I was growing up, could be a matter of life and death. And so you start to navigate in those different spaces, maintaining your authenticity of who you are, where you grew up and representing, but at the same time, being on the cutting edge of fashion, because from LA and in America in general, we've exported, that hip hop culture, that swag, that flavor to the rest of the world. I'll tell you, I remember being in Hong Kong like 15 years ago, and I'm in a club where no one spoke English, but they're playing hip hop and they knew the words to all the songs. And I'm looking around going, that's us. That's what we brought to the world.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. When you think about your work, or when other leaders look back at things that you've done, what do you hope to say is your legacy? Or maybe you want to answer, what do you want your legacy to be?
No, my legacy is about what I've done for others. I have often seen my role as a leader as a privilege. It isn't about what I've done individually, although you can put that on LinkedIn. That's a reflection of the teams I've been a part of, the teams I've led, and the people I've developed. Mentorship has been an important part. I've been a mentorship chair for a Fortune 100 company where my mandate was to put VP plus level diverse talent throughout the organization, because it's about representation. Representation matters. You get different outcomes, better results, a more inclusive view of the business, because you're taking all of these different views and driving a business forward, not just one line of thinking. When I started this discussion about the leader that said they wanted to be the sort of leader that people want to work for, which has informed my philosophy around employee engagement. When you get people who will do that, not only will they work harder, they also now start to think about, where does this job fit within the greater career strategy? They start to think about how they can develop others, and it becomes this flywheel effect of each one teach one. My legacy is really about, it isn't just, hey, look at me, I reached this title, I've been a senior vice president of this company. It's more along the lines of, but who do you bring with you? And I can look around and say, this person, we all elevated each other.
I love that. That's absolutely amazing. So this has been wonderful, enlightening. I've learned so much and quite generous with sharing a lot of nuggets. I'm hoping that everyone listening takes something away. What are you working on right now, JP? And where can people find you if they want to collaborate or just follow?
So formally, the company is cxgrowthstrategies.com. That's where you can find me. I also elevate my platform on LinkedIn, JP Dumas 1, I think it is on LinkedIn. Also, Confessions of a CX Executive. I have both a newsletter and a podcast where we talk about CX stuff. But honestly, it's not really about CX. It's about leadership, people, resilience, and the ability to pivot. So those are all the ways you can find me. JP Dumas is the easiest place to find me. And what I'm working on next is I'm thinking about how do I redesign the podcast and elevate my voice even more. I had someone tell me the other day, content's important, but distribution is really where it's at. That's going to allow me to be more impactful, not only for myself, but for other people, so we can build this community of people who want to help companies be successful.
I love that because you have so much to offer. And what's the point if a lot of people don't have access to it? I'm glad that you're doing that.
Cool. Absolutely.
So more people can experience your awesomeness.
Yeah, like I say, we work with small and mid-sized companies to help improve this experience and have these discussions, whether it's an individual looking for someone to advise them, looking for executive coaching, or from a fractional perspective, I fit the bill in all of those because it's more than just about building decks. It's about saying operationally, how do we move your business forward today so you can start to count the money faster? That's what I do.
And it's really critical when I say small and medium businesses, definitely for small businesses, to your point, when you move from corporate to having your own thing, now you're wearing all these hats. And sometimes customer experience is not necessarily the very top of the list because you're just trying to survive. But
it's not on the top of the list, but we often have to remind people that once you get these customers, what are you going to do to keep them? That's your experience. And if you answer that question too late, you'll soon be out of business.
That is so true. Yeah. So everyone listening, please make sure to follow JP on LinkedIn and check his company out. We're going to leave all the information in the show notes so you can access it. Share with us what you learned, what was most helpful from this episode. And if there's anything you plan to take action on, just let us know. We will appreciate it. Follow J on LinkedIn, follow me as well, and check him out at his company. Make sure that customer experience is not, if you're an entrepreneur, it's not the last thing on your list. It has to be right there at the top because it's easier to sell to a client that appreciates everything you're doing than it is to find a new one.
Absolutely. I'll leave your audience with this. In a world of AI, humans still matter and customer experience will be your differentiator.
Thank you so much for listening. Join me for the next episode where I bring you another incredible guest. Right?